All right, George Stack. See what you got.
Why don't men want to hang out anymore? Can someone please explain this phenomenon to me? And I've spoken to so many women who date men about this, and I've seen other people talk about this before. I'm just confused because aren't men supposed to be?
Okay. So things have changed a lot in the last 2 decades when it comes to this. There is so much guilt and shame when it comes to hanging out with a girl if it's just for sex. Guys, unfortunately, have to manage this minefield in a very specific way because no matter what happens, if something negative happens, it's always going to be the guy's fault. A girl will come in, she'll say, "Oh, I only want sex," which she'll never say those words, she'll always word it in a different way. What then happens every single time is that one party catches feelings. Normally, this is the girl. Now, I have heard cases where the guy catches feelings, but this is way more rare than the girl catching feelings. Because she caught feelings, it's no longer just an arrangement anymore. Now there's more built in. There is always more built in. Sex is never free from that perspective. There's always some sort of emotional burden involved as soon as it happens. It's gotten so bad at this point that the only guys that even bother doing it are guys that just don't care at all about the consequences and just deal with it anyway. This is a small percentage of guys. The majority of guys who've been trained to have a moral conscience are just not going to bother at all. The fallout is just too great. The risk-reward ratio just doesn't exist. For whatever reason, nobody wants to address the truth of what it is. Let's keep going.
Like, why do they all of a sudden want to just write letters like it's the 18th century? Don't get me wrong, texting has its place, the little tease of liking someone's Instagram story, but me personally, I don't want a pen pal. I want to hang out. You might be like, oh, like men are just...
In case you're wondering, by the way, when she says she wants to hang out, it means she wants to have sex. Okay? In case that wasn't clear yet. It's funny too because this is a perfect example of how girls layer these things. They want you only for sex, but they're not going to ever say it and you can't insinuate it either. You have to play into this game because if you don't, they're going to look like a hoe. And if they look like a hoe, they're going to get turned off and they're going to blame you for making them feel that way. So what you have to do is you have to perpetually play into this game where they're not just using you for sex, but they are just using you for sex. They aren't a hoe because they want this, and they may want something in the future, but it's unclear. I really feel that this point exactly is so difficult for guys to understand. It's this exact point that gets into that insane logic of girls want guys to manipulate them. Girls want the intimacy, but there's so many social restrictions around it that they want you to simultaneously play that surface level game while also understanding what's going on behind the scenes, but never addressing it and never talking about it and still always dealing with the emotional fallout when it happens. It doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of guys, but that's just how it is. And that's something you have to deal with if you want to entertain women in this way.
Avoidant. Men aren't emotionally available. Honestly, I'm avoidant. I'm not emotionally available. I want to move overseas next year. Like, I'm not looking for a relationship. I'm not opposed to it. I'm super chill. I'm kind of like boys' dream. And what gets me is that they are the ones instigating it. They're the ones putting pen to paper. They're the ones sending the message. Not even just once. You know how it's like, oh, they send a message first once. I send a message first once. Sometimes they'll send a message first 3 times. Yet still they don't want to hang out. And I'm like, okay, you're not indifferent enough to ghost me. You're not indifferent enough to wait for me to message you. But you're indifferent enough to not want to hang out. I'd be like, oh, Jordan, like, why didn't you just ask them to hang out? I have. But I'm not going to do that like 3 times in a row because that's crazy.
Honestly, what I think it is in the majority of these cases is that men have become so forcibly feminized that this is now how they get their fix without necessarily dabbling in waters that are too deep that they now have to deal with all the emotional turmoil. This is what I genuinely believe it is. You can't get called out for being an ass if you never did anything in the first place.
In my mind, how it works is if I ask you to hang out and we hang out, you either don't like me and respectfully ghost me, or you do like me and you ask to see me again. That's normal, right? Honestly, it is normally me asking to hang out first. I'm a pretty forward person. But what keeps happening to me, not once, not twice, what keeps happening to me is we hang out and then I have a pen pal. Like, what are you doing? Just trying to collect girls like Pokemon in your Instagram DMs? Like, what is happening?
Guys just have a lot of fear of engaging with women now. I'd argue some of it is irrational for sure, but a lot of it is very rational. For a lot of guys, dealing with women has become a death sentence. Literally. Girls have so much power through the institution and through social structure that guys simply have zero leverage anymore. They don't want to get caught up too deep in it because then their reputation suffers. Because most guys now are feminized, they don't want to feel alone. Most of these guys have already been burned once, where they engaged with a girl, it didn't work out, they were blamed, and they got isolated from their social situation. I can't count the number of times guys have come to me asking this exact question. I had a girlfriend in a friend group, we broke up, and now I'm no longer invited to the friend group activities. Unfortunately, guys are just choosing to tap out of the game instead. Do I think it's the right thing to do? No. I'm simply explaining the reality behind why guys are choosing to engage with women less and less, and it's only going to get worse. If you like this video, like and subscribe. If you want to see more of my private content, don't forget to check the link in the description below.